bring in right now to the conversation Mark McKinnon. He's the co-creator and co-host of The Circus on Showtime. You know, Mark, you've been through one or two of these. This reminds me so much of 2014. We didn't know which way things were going. I remember that Kay Hagan race where Kay Hagan and Tom Tillis were battling back and forth. Kay Hagan always seemed to be up 1-2 points throughout the entire campaign. Too close to call, but most people said, she's going to end up winning it by a point or two. Then, of course, Tom Tillis came out of nowhere, and everything seemed to break for Republicans, just enough to make it a big night for Republicans. Right now, hard to say, isn't it? What's your latest take from what you see out there?
It feels a lot like that, Joe. I mean, I think this election has kind of gone in three waves. One is the spring, where Republicans look like they'd have a huge advantage. It would be a big red wave, and then we had the Dobbs decision and legislative accomplishments by the president. So Democrats kind of got their mojo back. And then, I was in Ohio last week with Ryan and Vance when that inflation news broke, and you just could feel the chill that set in the kind of the whole electorate. And as people turn back to economic issues, which of course is an advantage for Republicans. So I agree with you. It feels a lot like 2014. It's just a sense where people are kind of, we get very complicated about this, but at the end of the day, people are like, I don't feel so good. And, let's maybe put the other team in.
Yeah, Mark, we want to play part of a conversation you had with another former Republican strategist, Tim Miller, for The Circus, in which you look back on the 2008 presidential campaign and how the current state of the Republican Party can be traced back to the nomination of Sarah Palin for vice president. Take a look.
I revere John McCain, and when he asked me to be his chief media advisor for his 2008 presidential run, I said, I'll mow your lawn in Sedona if you want me to. But I have one caveat, and that is I've met this guy, Barack Obama. I like him. I don't agree with all his politics, but he's going to run for the Democratic nomination. If he gets it, I would be uncomfortable being the tip of the spear attacking this guy. I mean, I think his candidacy would be good for the country. So I walked away from the campaign.
That had to be tough.
Well, it's the hardest thing I've ever done professionally. It's just sort of a foreshadowing that things were going to get ugly.
Yeah. That
the party was headed, and that McCain would be kind of dragged in a direction that I wouldn't have been totally comfortable with. And sure enough, he picks Sarah Palin. And that's, to me, where things really began to go off the rails for the Republican Party. When they called me in like October and said, Mayday, Mayday, McKinnon, we need you. So I said, I'll come down for one night and do some debate prep. And we're at the ranch. She comes rolling in with her posse and a ton of personality. Gets right up in my face. Like, you're the traitor that walked away from the campaign. I'm like,
really?
You sort of got it. It's like, this woman's she's got some juice. But then we go in later to do the debate prep, and 10 minutes into it, like 2 or 3 questions in, and she locks up completely. And it's a pretty basic question. And it was like, what would our basic foreign policy be towards NATO? And she's like, what's NATO? And then everything stops. We all walk outside. Mark Wallace turns to me, he's like, what do you think? I said, oh God, we are So I went back in and I saw a side of her not many people see. She was a sobbing, wet mess. I mean, she was like, I can't do this. I'm going to embarrass McCain. I'm going to embarrass the party. I'm going to embarrass the country. But 4 or 5 nights later.
Nice to meet you. Hey, can I call you Joe? Okay, good.
She cleared the bar, which is all you got to do in a debate, right? It's all about expectations. And she beat expectations.
The interesting thing to me about that story is it shows Sarah Palin the human, because I think it was a bottom-up thing that turned her into what she became, right? She's out there at those stages at the events. What are the people cheering for?
Our opponent is someone who sees America as imperfect enough to pal around with terrorists who targeted their own country.
Right, the voters didn't want a campaign finance reform Sarah Palin, right? They wanted the anti-elite grievance Sarah Palin.
Yeah. Well, and to me, it's just that's the critical point that I look at. I mean, lots of things have happened over the last decade or two to bring us to where we are today.
At the time, I don't think anyone could have predicted that the monster would have blossomed out of her to the degree that it did.
Yeah.
But you still have to grapple with the reality that it did. That was the embryo for all of the stuff that we see now.
No question about it.
Then there's this direct line from Palin and those monster truck rallies that she had.
Tea Party, Trump.
Kari Lake.
Wow,
Yeah, so-
that is such a fascinating conversation.
First of all, Mark, with a little bit of perspective and seeing from 2008 moving forward, first of all, let's just be really blunt here. It wasn't Sarah Palin's fault that she was thrown into trying to figure out geopolitical. I mean, she was a one-term governor from Alaska. Now, of course, she should have said no. Right, but what one-term governor from Alaska is going to say no to that? I'm still shocked that she was put in a position where you went in there and others who tried to prep her had to try to get her standing on stage with somebody who'd been in the Senate since 1974. It was just the height of recklessness to select her, first of all. But secondly, I will say, people responded to Sarah Palin on a gut level. I saw it in Pensacola. It was a precursor to Donald Trump. And in 2010, anybody she endorsed seemed to win.
Yeah, Joe, it was clearly an impetuous decision, and think how different things could have been. Because remember, John McCain was thinking about picking Joe Lieberman, a Democrat, to be a kind of a dream unity ticket, and then Lindsey Graham leaked it, and then everybody freaked out, and that forced them into kind of a corner where they did the throw deep Hail Mary to Sarah Palin, and then off we went into the rabbit hole, which has led. I mean, listen, she didn't start it. There was Newt Gingrich and a lot of it, but I think it was a pivotal point which could have gone either way, and it led to. And I think Tim made a great point that she was reacting to the anger out there among the electorate, which has just grown and grown, and that Trump tapped into, and now others are tapping into, and now we're getting candidates like Kari Lake, which is a real echo of Sarah Palin.
Well, and let me say
really
something
is.
else too, and I guess I'm not going to be careful when I say this. She's also reacting to the fact Mika and I went to an event in, was it Minneapolis, the night after she gave her speech? Mm-hmm. We were absolutely shocked about the rumors and the garbage that people from some of the most established media organizations were spreading around about Sarah Palin and her family. It's something that Nicole Wallace was having to fight every second, and she would have to call these people back and say, "Are you kidding me? You're really going to run?" So whatever fault Sarah Palin has in this, we want to know about, why do people on the right distrust the media? Let me tell you something. Mika, who, of course, has never voted for a Republican, I think, in her life, was horrified by the garbage that some of the most respected figures in media were spewing out, talking about stories they were going to run on Sarah Palin, all because they were freaking out by the fact that this one-term governor from Alaska had actually hit all of her marks in the convention speech. I got to say, it was really shocking to both of us. So what I'm talking about is, yes, we need to look at Sarah Palin. We need to look at the toxicity that followed. We need to look at the toxicity that led to Trump. We also need to look at ourselves and say, what was our part in all of this? And creating this massive distrust. I mean, Saturday Night Live even lampooned reporters and their coverage of Sarah Palin.
Great point, Joe. A little self-reflection is certainly warranted here across the board for everybody. But that was a dark chapter, and unfortunately, John McCain used to say it gets darkest just before it goes completely black. But I remain a prisoner of hope, and I'm going to keep pushing this big rock up the steep hill.